Imagine this. I turned my wife's betrayal into the greatest win of my life. Not only did I expose her, but I also walked away richer than ever. You won't believe who made me the offer and why. Let me take you back to where it all began. So let's start. My name's Samuel Carter, and yeah, I'm a genius. No, really, I am. My IQ is around 190, which officially puts me in that category. I was the smartest kid in my grade, taking college courses by the time I hit 10th grade. I graduated college at 19 and went straight into a master's in computer science. The moment I finished, a company that quite literally keeps the world running hired me. Let me put it this way, when you flip on your bathroom light in the morning, that's me. When you swipe your card for that overpriced $10 coffee, I'm behind that too. I keep the systems running, make sure the bad guys don't mess with them, and protect your information. But all that knowledge and success came with a cost, my love life. I didn't lose my virginity until I was 20, and even then, it felt more like a clinical experiment than a passionate encounter. We both reached the finish line, called it a success, and never did it again. It wasn't until my first big bonus and a six-figure salary that I decided to get serious about dating. I bought myself a sleek suit and a Mustang, figuring that was a good start. My first 2 nights out were complete disasters. But on the third, I walked into a bar, ordered a whiskey neat, and planned to sip it slowly. I hated the taste, but it made me look like I belonged. I tipped the bartender well to hold my spot, and that's when she appeared, a stunning blonde who slid onto the stool next to me and asked if I'd buy her a drink. She did most of the talking while I nodded along, doing my best to hide my awkwardness. After about an hour, she said she had to go but asked if I'd take her to dinner that Saturday. She gave me her number and address, and just like that, I was in the game. That weekend, I showed up at her place with a bouquet of flowers. She smiled, put them in water, and off we went to a high-end restaurant. She was obsessed with my car, peppering me with questions. Dinner was romantic, and afterward, we drove around for a while, just talking. When I walked her to her door, she kissed me on the cheek. I felt like I was floating. We went out again the next week, and after our third date, she invited me inside. That night, I got the full boyfriend experience. We took a break, then went for round 2. When it was all said and done, she looked me in the eye and called me a stud. I had never felt so confident in my life. For 6 months, everything was perfect. Then, one night, while I was munching on a cold turkey sandwich, she dropped a bomb. She was pregnant. I was stunned, but not for the reason she thought. I'll explain that part later. Instead, I asked her what she wanted to do. Without hesitation, she told me her religion didn't allow abortion, so she was having the baby. I told her I'd do the right thing. I'd marry her if she wanted. She said yes. 2 days later, we were in Las Vegas, standing inside the wee Chapel of Love, saying our vows. We celebrated at the MGM and flew home, where I moved Amanda out of her apartment and into my place. Calling it a house would be an understatement. It was a mansion. 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, a 4-car garage, a pool, tennis courts, a hot tub, and a fully stocked gym in the basement. I even had a private theater with stadium seating for 30, though it was barely ever used. Amanda was thrilled. She quit her job to focus on the pregnancy, and every day, I half expected to come home and find her in tears over a miscarriage. See, there was something she didn't know. We were supposed to be exclusive, but when she told me she was pregnant, she had no idea about one small but crucial detail: I was sterile. Had been for a long time. When I was a kid, my mother refused to get me vaccinated, and I caught the measles. By the time I recovered, the damage was done. I couldn't have children. I never told Amanda. Never planned to. The truth was, I always wanted kids. I grew up an only child. Both of my parents were only children. Now they were gone, and I had no family left. So when the doctor told us we were having twins, it was the happiest day of my life. I never let on that I knew the truth. And when the boys were born, they looked just like me: black hair, blue eyes. They had their mother's nose, but otherwise, they could have easily passed as mine. And honestly, I didn't care about biology. They were my sons. For the first 2 months, life was good. Then Amanda changed. It was like postpartum depression hit her hard. She became impossible to be around, and we cycled through 3 nannies because she couldn't get along with any of them. Then, out of nowhere, she snapped back to normal. She was happy again, doting on the boys, laughing, playful. She also started going out once or twice a week with her old girlfriends. I didn't mind. Our sex life was back on track, too. We were together 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. I had no complaints. I even started taking on more of the childcare duties, and to my surprise, I genuinely enjoyed it. Everything seemed fine. Then, one afternoon, while I was grabbing lunch, one of Amanda's old friends walked up to my table. We made small talk. She asked about the twins, and just as she was about to leave, she casually dropped, Tell Amanda to give me a call sometime. I haven't seen that girl in ages. That one little comment changed everything. The night before, Amanda had told me she was out having drinks with that very same friend. That's when I knew something wasn't right. That's when the surveillance started. I installed a GPS tracker on her car, another on her phone, and cameras throughout the house, just in case she ever decided to bring her affair home. She never did. But the trackers told me exactly where she went and who she met. The next time she claimed to be out with the girls, I followed her. The GPS led me straight to a cheap motel on the edge of town. I parked outside room 104, my twin boys strapped into their car seats, and waited. Amanda's car was there, parked right next to another, one of the only other vehicles in the lot with our state's license plates. I took pictures of both cars, noted the plates, and drove home. By the time Amanda walked through the door, the boys were bathed and in bed. She headed straight for the shower, then slipped into bed beside me, kissing my cheek and mumbling that she was exhausted. Yeah, I bet. The next morning, Mrs. Henry Carter received an envelope. Inside were photos, her husband's car parked outside the Super 9 motel. Along with them was a note pointing out the car parked right beside his. It belonged to Amanda Carter. To say all hell broke loose? That would be putting it lightly. Mrs. Carter showed up at my house like a storm, and before Amanda could even react, she slapped her across the face. I had rushed home, pretending I just received the same damning photos via email. I stepped inside just in time to see the impact, the sheer force of it making Amanda stumble back. I confronted her. She didn't deny a thing. Through sobs, she admitted it all, saying it was just a stupid, meaningless fling, something triggered by postpartum depression. She begged for forgiveness. Tears streamed down her face. And damn it, I cried too. In the end, I told myself I had to be the bigger person. I forgave her. But I made one thing crystal clear. This was her one and only chance. If it ever happened again, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd divorce her and take the kids. She promised, swore up and down that it was over, that she'd never betray me again. For nearly a year, life fell back into its usual rhythm. But I never let my guard down. The GPS trackers stayed. The cameras remained. Now, let's see things through Amanda's eyes. How did Samuel and Henry Carter's wife catch me? Simple. Samuel was at home playing perfect father to his kids, except they weren't his. I had tried for months to get pregnant by him. Nothing. So, I took matters into my own hands. One night, I found a black-haired, blue-eyed stranger at a bar. We hooked up until he was completely drained. I don't even remember his name, but that didn't matter. What mattered was it worked. Samuel is so in love with those boys that he doesn't see the truth, or maybe he just doesn't want to. Now, he's threatening to leave me and take them if I cheat again. The way he says it, so serious, so certain, it's almost adorable. But here's the thing, we live in a no-fault state. I could sleep with half the city and it wouldn't make a difference. I'd still get the house, the kids, child support, and a comfortable alimony check. Especially since I don't work, and Samuel makes more money than I can even count doing. Whatever it is he actually does. I never really paid attention. Never cared enough to ask. 6 months after that slap, after Henry Carter's wife divorced him and moved on, I ran into an old flame, Jordan Bennett. Jordan. My first. Back in high school, I was a junior, he was a senior, and our little romance ended when my dad's job moved us out of state. I moved on. So did Jordan. I never heard from him again until that day. And yet, here he was, standing right in front of me in the middle of a grocery store, looking like he hadn't aged a day. The moment our eyes met, his face broke into a grin. Jordan. I asked, almost not believing it. Amanda, he said, offering his hand. I didn't shake it. I stepped forward and kissed him, right there in the bread aisle of Winn-Dixie. We talked, catching up on years lost. He wasn't married, wasn't seeing anyone. Just renting a house in a nice neighborhood, not some cheap motel. Way more convenient. He told me he worked weekends and had Wednesdays and Thursdays off. I found that odd, but I let it slide. The only thing that stuck out to me? His work shirt. Where his name should have been, it said Daniel. I figured I'd ask about it later. Samuel's side of the story. That evening, I walked into the house, and the smell of slow-cooked pot roast filled the air. Amanda was acting extra affectionate, something that instantly set off alarm bells. I checked the GPS logs. Nothing suspicious. Since her last affair, her behavior had been steady. Our intimacy was normal, even frequent. We were together 3, 4 times a week, and nothing seemed off. But something felt wrong. Her sudden enthusiasm? It didn't sit right with me. So I upgraded my surveillance. That night, after dinner, I borrowed her phone under the excuse of checking something and installed an app. From now on, I'd get an alert every time she made or received a call. I could even tap into her phone's microphone, listening to conversations in real time. Technology really is a beautiful thing. Amanda sighed. I waited until Tuesday to call Jordan. Let me be clear, I love Samuel in my own way. But love and ambition aren't the same thing. I grew up in a blue-collar family, always one step away from struggling. I promised myself I'd never live like that again. When I saw Samuel pull up in that Maserati, his Rolex catching the light as he paid for his drink, I knew I had to have him. That quiet, socially awkward man was mine the moment I decided he was. 6 months later, I was pregnant and married. The kid sealed my future. His money, his stability, they were mine forever. But that didn't mean I had to be stuck. I deserved fun. And Samuel? He'd never find out. On Wednesday, I pulled into Jordan's garage, slipping inside his house without a soul noticing. No evidence. No hotel records. No compromising photos this time. How do I even describe that afternoon? Exhilarating. The risk, the thrill of outsmarting my genius husband, made it even better. In the heat of the moment, I even whispered to Jordan that he was better than Samuel. I didn't mean it. It was just the passion talking. I hadn't thought about Jordan in years, and now, here we were. Afterward, I cleaned up, made sure I left no trace. Jordan wanted me to stay longer, but I couldn't risk it. I promised him I'd be back tomorrow. The church had a Mother's Day out program. I could drop the twins off at 9 a.m., pick them up at 3 p.m. That meant more time with Jordan. He agreed immediately. And just like that, we had a standing arrangement. I drove home feeling smug, like I had everything under control. A flicker of guilt crept in, so that night in bed, I let Samuel have his way without a word of complaint. Samuel's perspective. She thinks she got away with it today. She has no idea I was listening when she whispered to her lover about how much she missed him, how good he was. So much for trust. The house she visited was rented under the name Daniel Harrington. Big guy. Drove a car registered in his name. Worked as a forklift operator in the industrial district. But why did Amanda keep calling him Jordan? I needed more time. More proof. And a way to eliminate him from our lives, just like I had with Carter. Jordan sighed. You want my version? Fine. I was the high school basketball star, not good enough to go pro, but good enough to be the guy everyone knew. And Amanda? She was my girl. One night, in the backseat of my grandma's old Buick, I took her virginity. It was good. Jordan's perspective. Amanda? Man, that was a blast from the past. We dated for about 6 months before she moved away. After that, I never heard from her again. Life kept moving, and so did I. College? Not an option. No scholarships, no job prospects. Just another broke kid with average grades and no future. So, I did what I had to do. I started selling on the corner. At first, it was just to get by, but the money was too good to walk away from. My grandmother hated it, begged me to stop. But what else was I supposed to do? I kept climbing the ranks, earning the trust of one of the big Mexican bosses. Eventually, I wasn't just another street dealer, I was managing the guys on the corner. That came with responsibilities. One night, we caught a guy skimming. The boss didn't even have to say anything. I knew what needed to be done. I took him into an alley and handled it. Afterward, I had a choice. Ditch the gun in the river or play it smart. I chose smart. My boss loved the shooting range, so the next day, I took him there. As we wrapped up, I played dumb, joking that my gun wasn't shooting straight. He grabbed it, fired off 8 rounds, then handed it back, shaking his head. It's not the gun, it's the shooter, he smirked. I played along, but inside, I was grinning. I had just put his prints on the murder weapon, just in case I ever needed leverage. For nearly 2 years, life was good. I was making money, running my own territory, keeping Sierra Madre happy. Then, everything went south. I had just picked up 10 kilos at the border when I got a flat tire. A cop stopped to help, but I must have looked too nervous. Before I knew it, he was checking my trunk. 5 more squad cars pulled up, and that was it. Game over. In lockup, a lawyer showed up. Told me to sit tight. He'd work out a deal. 2 days later, he came back with an offer, 25 years, maybe 15 with good behavior. Screw that. I had a better idea. I asked for a private meeting with the DEA agent who busted me. I had something they'd want. Jose Gomez, one of the cartel's top guys, had personally taken out a street dealer. And I had the gun with his prints to prove it. They jumped on the deal. I walked away free under witness protection. Jose? He got 99 years in a super axe. No parole. 1 visit a month. No phone calls. But there was a problem. Jose was the son of Don Diego, head of the Sierra Madre cartel. And Don Diego didn't let things slide. He put a $500,000 bounty on my head. And when the cartel comes for you, they don't just kill you, they take your head as proof. The feds gave me a new name, a new city, and $100,000 to start over. I found an apartment, got a warehouse job, learned how to drive a forklift, and kept my head down. For 2 years, I stayed under the radar. Then, one day at work, a truck driver called me by my real name. My stomach dropped. I turned, and there he was, an old high school buddy. We shook hands, made small talk. He had no clue what he had just done. That night, I called my contact in the Marshal Service. By morning, I was gone again. New city, new name, same game. I started over, got another warehouse job, and settled in. Then, I ran into Amanda. I hadn't thought about her in years, but as we talked, it was clear we were both in a position where secrets mattered. Sure, her husband wasn't going to put out a hit on her, but she had too much to lose. If we were careful, this could work. No one had to know. The first time was quick, she had to rush home. But she promised to come back the next day when we'd have more time. Amanda's perspective. I dropped the twins off at church and sped over to Jordan's. I had 5 full hours. 5 hours with no husband, no kids, no responsibilities. Pure bliss. As I pulled into his garage, the door was already open, hiding my car from sight. No one could see me. No one would ever know. I set my phone on the bedside table, just in case Samuel or the kids needed me. I wasn't expecting any calls, but better safe than sorry. Samuel's perspective. I heard everything. Every moan. Every breathless plea. Every whispered command. And then, I heard the words that made my blood run cold. Jordan Bennett, you're the best I've ever had. I had a name. I pulled up Daniel Harrington's driver's license. Same face, different name. That didn't make sense. Was Harrington a roommate? No, his ID and registration matched. Something was off. I dug deeper, and that's when I found it. Jordan Bennett was in the Federal Witness Protection Program. And according to the dark web, the Sierra Madre cartel had a price on his head, $500,000. Cartel guys don't just kill you. They erase you. I bet they'd cut me a deal. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting. When Amanda walked in, she looked surprised to see me. Normally, I didn't get home until 5. Amanda's perspective. Samuel was home early. That usually meant something went wrong at work. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe if I let him have me again tonight, it'd smooth things over. I walked in, expecting the usual greeting. No kiss. No smile. Just silence. He helped me settle the boys into the playpen, then followed me into the kitchen. Before I could even start dinner, he spoke. Sit down. Something about his tone made my stomach tighten. I got a phone call today, he said. From your phone. I frowned. My phone. Samuel pulled out his own phone and pressed play. And then, my world collapsed. Harder. Yes, right there. Don't stop. I lunged forward and stopped the recording, my mind racing. How? Then it hit me. I must have accidentally hit speed dial when I set my phone on the bedside table. That was it. That had to be it. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. Samuel's eyes locked onto mine. Do you remember what I told you would happen if I caught you cheating again? He asked. I took a deep breath, studying him. This was Samuel, the same socially awkward, introverted man I had wrapped around my finger from the start. The quiet, nerdy guy who had been putty in my hands. I straightened up, letting my voice go cold. Samuel, stop, I said. Just stop. You're not going to divorce me. You lose big time. This is a no-fault state. Amanda's perspective. I crossed my arms, meeting Samuel's stare head-on. Adultery means nothing in this state. If you divorce me, the boys and I keep the house. You'd be stuck paying for everything. Child support, alimony, all of it. And since I don't work, the alimony would be substantial. Hell, I could even move Jordan in to help me raise your kids, and there's not a thing you could do about it. I watched his jaw tighten, his mind processing my words. So think carefully before you make the biggest mistake of your life. His eyes darkened. Who is Jordan? I sighed, acting like this was all just an unfortunate misunderstanding. My old high school boyfriend. My first. I let that hang in the air for a moment. I ran into him at the grocery store last week, and yesterday was the first time we got together. Samuel said nothing, so I pressed on. Look, Samuel, I didn't come home and give you sloppy seconds. Believe me, this whole fascination with his size, it'll pass. He's selfish in bed. 2, maybe 3 months, and I'll be over him. And then we can go back to the way things should be, raising our kids together. Not you living in some sad little apartment and seeing them once a month. Samuel took a slow, steady breath. All right, but if we're doing this, I need you to promise me a few things. And I have to trust that you'll keep your word. I tilted my head, curious. Like what? First, he said, you won't fall in love with him and leave me. I laughed, shaking my head. That's not happening. I promise. Jordan works in a warehouse, Samuel. I'm not running off with some blue-collar worker. Second, he continued, never bring him to our house. I put a hand on my chest, feigning offense. I swear, this home is for us and the kids. No one else. Third, he said, his voice quieter now. I don't want him knowing that I know about him. That stays between us. I want it to be our secret, something I can hold on to while you're with him. I smiled at that, reaching across the table to take his hand. That's easy, baby. He'll always think it's just between the two of us. I get why you want that. It makes it ours. Fourth, he added, no calling him from the house phone. If you need to talk to him, step outside and use your cell. I waved a hand dismissively. Not a problem. We barely even call each other. Just quick confirmations about when he's free. That's all. Samuel nodded, his expression unreadable. All right. He hesitated for a second, then asked, when are you seeing him again? I shrugged. Like I said, just Wednesdays and Thursdays. No dates, no clubs, no overnights, just intimacy. That's it. Samuel didn't respond right away. I leaned back, watching him. He was brilliant in so many ways, but naive in others. All he needed to forgive me was the assurance that he still had access to my body. Give it 6 months, and I bet I could even get him to watch. Samuel was the perfect husband. He just didn't know it yet. Samuel's perspective. I told her I had to work over the weekend. That was a lie. Instead, I spent my time covering my tracks, scrubbing my dark web searches on Jordan Bennett and Daniel Harrington. Then, I set up an appointment with an attorney. Not just any lawyer. Miguel Rojas's attorney, the one handling his appeal. I had information that could be very useful to him. And I had a price. Sunday night, I played the exhausted husband, too tired for intimacy. Amanda accused me of sulking. I ignored her. Early Tuesday morning, I left before she woke up. I had a 2-hour flight ahead of me, heading straight to the city where Patrick Vaughn, Esquire, had his law office. A pompous name for a pompous man. When I arrived, I was shown straight into his office. He leaned back in his chair, hands folded, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Carter, how can I help you? I sat down, met his gaze. Actually, Mr. Vaughn, it's me who can help you. I slid a small thumb drive across his desk. I'll get straight to the point. I have information that could assist in the appeal for the Miguel Rojas case. He studied the drive before plugging it into his computer. 10 minutes later, after reviewing the contents, he finally looked up. Where did you get this? His tone was unreadable. I leaned forward slightly. That particular gun? It stores all its footage in the cloud. Convenient, isn't it? Vaughn exhaled slowly. And what exactly are you looking for in return? $500,000. He didn't react, at least, not outwardly. After a moment, he simply said, hold that thought. Would you mind waiting in the lobby? I need to confer with an associate. I nodded and stepped out, taking a seat outside his office. 15 minutes later, the office door opened, not for Vaughn, but for a stunning woman I knew hadn't been in there before. Meaning, she had entered through another way. She was beautiful, long, flowing black hair, deep dark eyes, and a quiet confidence that made her presence impossible to ignore. She smiled, her voice smooth as silk. Hello, Mr. Carter. I'm Natalia. I barely managed a response. Oh, okay. Louder than I intended. Vaughn smirked behind her. Good. There will be no need for you to contact this office again. Natalia will handle everything from here. He leaned back in his chair, dismissing me with a nod. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I'm sorry this office couldn't be of more help to you. Natalia stepped forward, linking her arm through mine. Shall we? I barely had time to process what was happening before she guided me toward the elevators. Don't worry, she murmured, her voice a near whisper. Miguel's lawyer prefers to keep his knowledge of certain matters to a minimum. We stepped into the parking garage, where a man stood beside a black Lincoln Town car with very tinted windows. The kind of car that screamed cartel business. The driver opened the back door, and Natalia slid in effortlessly, then patted the seat beside her. Are you coming? She asked, her dark eyes dancing with amusement. I hesitated for half a second before climbing in beside her. As the door shut, sealing me inside, I couldn't take my eyes off her. The way she carried herself, the way her hair cascaded over her shoulders, it was impossible to ignore. She turned to me, completely at ease. Lou, take us to Mama Torres, she instructed. Then, with a smirk, she added, I hope you like Mexican food. I cleared my throat, still trying to regain my composure. Of course. She chuckled softly. Sensing my nerves, Natalia reached out, taking my hand in hers. Her grip was warm, her touch deliberate. Wait until we get to the restaurant, she whispered, her voice smooth as honey. We'll have more privacy there. Samuel's perspective. I nodded, staring out the window as the city blurred past. The silence between us was thick, but I couldn't stop glancing at Natalia, her long legs elegantly crossed, the way her blouse hinted at more beneath. By the time we arrived, it was obvious this wasn't her first visit. The moment we stepped inside, we were greeted like royalty and led to a private dining area. As the door shut behind us, I noticed a waiter discreetly flipping on a jamming device near a credenza. I smirked. Things were about to get interesting. Natalia leaned in slightly, her dark eyes locked onto mine. Now, Samuel, let's talk. Do you know where Jordan Bennett is? Yes, I answered simply. She didn't blink. We're offering $500,000 for his whereabouts. Give me his location, and I'll arrange payment immediately. I shook my head. I'm not interested in money. Consider the thumb drive a gift. I came across it while looking into Jordan. Any decent attorney, or the feds, could have found it 2 years ago if they'd done their job. Natalia smirked knowingly. The feds wanted Miguel convicted. They never got solid evidence on drug charges, so when Jordan gave them what they needed, they ran with it. They didn't care about digging deeper. I shrugged. Well, I hope that file helps. I took a slow sip of my beer. But about Jordan? I don't want money. I want something else. She leaned in slightly, studying me. Tell me. I can make a lot of things happen. Before I could answer, the waiter arrived with an incredible spread: enchiladas, fajitas, refried beans, guacamole, tacos, warm tortillas. 2 bottles of Dos Equis hit the table. Let's eat, Natalia said smoothly, while you tell me what you really want. Over the best Mexican food I had ever tasted, I told her everything. From my childhood to my career, to my wife demanding I agree to her affair with Jordan. When I got to the part about knowing the twins weren't mine because of my sterility, she smiled. I tensed. That's not funny. Her expression sobered instantly. I wasn't laughing at you, she said gently. I understand that pain. Wanting a family but never being able to have one. For the first time, I saw something raw behind those dark eyes. She told me how, at 15, doctors had found cysts on her ovaries. They had to be removed. She would never have children. That silenced me. When I told her about Amanda's 2 affairs, she muttered something in Spanish, pa. A sound of disgust. Finally, I reached the part one had been dreading. I hesitated before speaking. When you take Jordan, take her too. Natalia studied me carefully. Are you sure? What about the kids? My boys aren't even 3. They won't remember her. I'll hire a live-in nanny. In a month, they'll forget all about their lying, cheating mother. She nodded, absorbing my words. When's the next time they'll be together? Tomorrow morning, I said, exhaling slowly. She sat back, finishing her drink. Then kiss your wife goodbye forever. I blinked. So soon? Don't you need time to plan? Natalia shook her head. Last time, we waited until the weekend. He got away. We're not making that mistake again. Give me his address. I finished my beer, gave her what she needed. As we stepped outside, she flagged a waiting taxi. I reached for the door, but before I could step inside, she stopped me. When I turned, she leaned in close, her lips brushing against my cheek. Thank you, she whispered. As my taxi pulled away, I saw her slip into the black Lincoln, Lou closing the door behind her. I doubted I'd ever see her again. Wednesday afternoon, the bunker. I was working in the bunker, my private workspace 2 floors below my office, when my secretary buzzed in. Mr. Carter, you have visitors waiting in the lobby. I took the elevator up, entered my office through the side door, and buzzed her back. Show them in. 2 men stepped inside. One extended a hand. Mr. Carter, I'm Detective Preston. This is my partner, Joe Friday. We shook hands. I gestured for them to sit. I'll get right to the point, Preston said. Do you know where your wife is? I frowned. This morning, after the nanny arrived, she told me she was going shopping at the mall, then picking up groceries, then heading home. Why? Preston pulled a photograph from his folder and placed it in front of me. My stomach dropped. Oh my God, I whispered. What happened? We're not entirely sure, Preston admitted. We got a report of shots fired at the residence of a Daniel Harrington. When officers arrived, they found your wife dead. I swallowed hard. Daniel Harrington? I shook my head. No, I don't know him. Preston studied me. Take your time. I barely heard him. My mind raced. Amanda. My twins. I forced myself to speak. My boys. Where are my sons? Preston softened slightly. I know this is hard, but we need answers. Where were you this morning at 10 a.m.? I cleared my throat, steadying myself. Here. I arrived at 8 a.m. and haven't left all day. My secretary can confirm that. I met his gaze. So can FBI Special Agent Pilgrim. He was in my office from 9 to 10:30. Call him. He'll clear me immediately. Then you can focus on finding the real killer. Friday left the room. A few minutes later, he returned and whispered something to Preston. Preston nodded. Your story checks out. Then he asked, do you know Jordan Bennett? I stiffened slightly. Not personally. He was my wife's first boyfriend in high school. She told me about him. Preston and Friday exchanged a glance. Well, Friday said, according to our records, Jordan Bennett and Daniel Harrington are the same person. I blinked. How is that possible? Preston exhaled. Witness protection. My stomach twisted, but I kept my expression neutral. Look, Preston continued, we're working with two theories. 1. Someone from the Sierra Madre cartel found out who he was and killed your wife, blaming her for exposing him. I kept my breathing even. Or 2, he added, Jordan wanted your wife to run away with him, and when she refused, he shot her instead. I let the silence stretch before finally speaking. So, you're sure he's the one who killed her? Preston nodded grimly. We know he shot her. The weapon, a .45 automatic, was found at the scene, with his fingerprints all over it. I exhaled slowly. Why was she with him in the first place? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Friday hesitated. Then, finally, he said, we found evidence they were lovers. I let the words settle. Let them roll over me. Inside, I was smiling. But outside, I simply lowered my head, playing the part of the grieving husband. I'm sorry, Preston said, his voice calm but firm. Samuel's perspective. I stared at the photo, my stomach twisting. It is what it is, I muttered, swallowing down the bile rising in my throat. I ran a hand over my face, shaking my head. This just keeps getting worse. How long has this been going on? Preston sighed. No way to know for sure, but not long. He's only been in town for a few months. That's why we initially considered you a suspect. But the deeper we dig, the more it looks like this had everything to do with his past and nothing to do with a jealous husband. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Jordan was dead. My wife was dead. I thought I'd feel something, relief, satisfaction, justice. But all I felt was empty. Preston's voice was softer this time. I'm sorry for your loss. We'll keep you updated on the investigation. I'm sure you want justice for your wife. I nodded. I do. But please, don't involve me or my boys. Those cartel people are ruthless. They found him even in witness protection. If you cross them, they always get their pound of flesh. Preston met my gaze. I understand. I promise we'll keep you out of it. He stood. Again, I'm sorry for your loss. They left, and the only time I heard from them again was when the coroner called. Amanda's remains were ready for pickup. I arranged for her cremation. I drove to the beach, the same one she always complained about, too sandy, too hot, too messy. Wading into the water, I let out a bitter laugh. You lying, cheating woman. I know how much you hated the beach, so I'm going to leave you here forever. With that, I scattered her ashes into the waves. As I walked back to my car, I laughed. Not because I was happy. Not because I was free. Just because life had a twisted sense of humor. 2 weeks later, I had taken time off, not to grieve, but to be with my boys. One afternoon, I heard a car pull up. I went to the window. A sleek black Lincoln Town car sat outside. What now? The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Natalia standing there. Louis was behind her, carrying 2 suitcases. I hear you're looking for a live-in nanny, she said smoothly. She smirked. Cancel the ad. You just found one. I stood there, speechless. Don't just stand there, she teased. Go help Louis with my other bags. Still in shock, I followed Louis to the car, where we pulled out 4 more suitcases. After shaking his hand, I shut the door and walked inside. Natalia was already in the den, playing with the twins. They rolled on the floor, laughing, wrestling, tugging at her long, dark hair. Have these boys eaten yet? She asked. No, I admitted. Well, take over, and I'll find them something. And just like that, my life with Natalia began. That first night, she moved into my bedroom. The next morning, while the boys napped, she packed up everything that had belonged to Amanda. Clothes, pictures, makeup. Then she called Goodwill and had them haul it all away. At dinner, I struggled to find the right words. Natalia leaned back in her chair. Go on, Samuel. Let's get this over with. Ask me whatever you need to know. I hesitated. How? She nodded, as if she expected that. Fair question. She placed her fork down and folded her hands on the table. By the time your wife arrived that morning, Jordan was already in Mexico. We snatched him the night before, right after his warehouse shift. He didn't even see it coming. I stayed silent, letting her continue. We made sure his fingerprints were on the gun before he left. But when Amanda showed up, I was the only one there. She tilted her head slightly. I told her you had rejected her deal and that I'd be raising her kids in her place. That I'd take good care of them, and you. I swallowed, waiting for the rest. Then she said matter-of-factly, I put 3 rounds in her chest. My breath caught for half a second. She smiled, almost sympathetically. She went quickly, Samuel. She leaned forward slightly. Oh, and before I pulled the trigger, I made sure to tell her that you'd never have to worry about sloppy seconds with me. I grinned. I couldn't help it. This woman had executed my wife without hesitation. But still, she had pulled the trigger. I had to ask, do you know where the investigation stands? And what about Miguel? She smirked. The police are looking for Jordan as the murderer. The feds are scrambling, first, because he's now wanted for your wife's death, and second, because the judge ruled that the gun range footage was authentic. I raised an eyebrow. Footage. Natalia nodded. That video you handed over? It's damning. It clearly shows Jordan setting his pistol down, then Miguel inserting a magazine and firing 10 rounds before packing up his own gun. Afterward, Jordan bagged the pistol. She leaned back. That's the gun he later used to kill that corner boy. He made sure Miguel's prints were all over it. His get-out-of-jail-free card. I exhaled slowly. And now they're after him for that murder, too. Exactly. I processed everything. And Miguel. She smiled, almost affectionately. He's home, she said. I frowned. Home. She looked at me. With our father. I blinked. Our father. Natalia smirked. Yes. Miguel is my brother. I froze. She shrugged. As for Jordan. She trailed off, eyes darkening slightly. I wasn't there for that part, but from what I hear, he's buried somewhere south of El Paso. I hesitated before asking my final question. I need to know one more thing. It's personal, but important. She nodded. Go ahead. I won't lie to you. I took a deep breath. Amanda. I swallowed. She broke me. And part of it was because I paused, searching for the words. Was unsatisfied. If that's going to be a problem, let's end this now. I met her gaze, holding nothing back. Amanda made me feel small. I won't go through that again. For the first time, Natalia laughed. A real laugh. You gringos have a saying I like, she smirked. It's not the size of the magician's wand, but the magic in it. Then, her smirk faded into something softer. Believe me, Samuel, you have more than enough magic for me. 3 months later, we were married. Natalia insisted on honeymooning in Cancun. I let her handle the arrangements. Turned out, her father owned the resort. That was also when I noticed something. She never asked me for money. Not for groceries. Not for bills. Not even for the pool service. Plane tickets? Handled. When I suggested bringing the twins, she refused. Not on the honeymoon, she said firmly. Instead, she arranged for a nanny, a kind, older Mexican woman. Later, I found out she had been Natalia's nanny as a child. Her husband? Theo. Natalia's bodyguard. When we returned home, they moved in with us. My boys call Natalia Mommy. And in their little minds, she always has been. We never told them about Amanda. Life goes on. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you soon.